Oh, hi, Gary. Welcome to the Blood, Guts, and Paper Cuts podcast. This is the podcast where Sean O'Connor and Shannon Bushman sit down with some of horror's most creative people. We ask them to come on and to talk about their latest project, whether it be a book, a movie, a screenplay, their latest role, and we get into it and we let them talk about the experience, what it means to them, how it came to be, and how everybody could get their little peepers on it. What we've also asked them to do is suggest the perfect watch along, because you know we love movies here at Blood, Guts, and Paper Cuts. So they suggest a watch along that goes along perfectly with it. We unpack that and we get into it. It could be good, it could be bad. We're going to find out in real time, just like you. So sit back, enjoy yourselves. This is the Blood, Guts, and Paper Cuts podcast. Hey everybody, Sean here from the Blood, Guts, and Paper Cuts podcast and contributor to Macabre Daily, and it is my pleasure to introduce this week's guest, and that's none other than Mr. Neil McRobert, creator and host of the Talking Scared podcast. You know it, you love it. If you are even remotely aware of the insanely talented horror literature authors that have been producing the best in the genre for the past 10 years, then you've listened to him on Neil's podcast, because he's had everyone from Tananarive Due to Mike Flanagan to Stephen King himself. But more importantly, Neil is a voice and a platform for indie horror authors that are really trying to, to break through. And he's done so much for these authors. And, I know they appreciate it, and we love listening to those interviews. And we hope it continues for a long time to come. Neil created the podcast in 2020, and has over 200 episodes at this point, over 400,000 downloads. He's written articles for Esquire and Slate and Vulture and The Guardian. They're all phenomenal, by the way. He's working on a new novel. He's releasing his first novella, Good Boy. That's right, Ted. Shout out to Ted. We're looking at you, buddy. What an adorable pup. Can't wait to read it. Already pre-ordered. And it looks like 2025 is going to be a really great year for Neil. A lot of things happening. But the best of them all is that week after week, we get new episodes of the Talking Scared podcast. He's unmatched in getting incredible conversations out of these creative, delightful, passionate people about horror, all things horror and all things literature. And it's just like, the perfect combination. So sit back, have a listen. Neil is incredibly charming and thoughtful and insightful, intelligent conversation on its way. And then, Shannon and I happen to, he puts up with us. Enjoy seeing Neil get incredibly uncomfortable. The more Shannon and I compliment him, Neil let us know that as an Englishman, they're incredibly uncomfortable with getting praise. So we look forward to doling out more in the future to him, just to see him squirm a little bit. Neil, thank you so much for coming on. It was an absolute bucket moment for myself and Shannon. We can't wait to have you back. We're talking about Aterrados, otherwise known as Terrified here in the States. Demian Rugna's I believe it was his first movie, but it was the first one to really land. Incredibly scary, incredibly well made. There's differing opinions on the film. You'll find that out as you listen to the episode, but you're absolutely going to thoroughly enjoy it. So sit back and have a listen. Mr. Neil McRobert, take it away. We are so excited to have Neil McRobert on the podcast tonight. Now, Neil, before I let you introduce yourself, I do have to say that you are the cause of and the blame for the Simple Cuts podcast. When I started listening to you, I've listened to every episode, by the way. I mean, you have become like an institution in horror literature, and you were so inspiring, and you do such a fantastic job that, forgive me for trying to ride coattails, but I was like, I think I'm gonna give it a shot,
And then I convinced my good friend Shannon to jump on board. So you really are the catalyst for why we're here.
Yeah.
As I said, there's far worse things to be blamed for. There are far worse things I have been blamed. I'll take that one with honor. Sorry I've made you make a podcast, because it's hard work, right? It's a lot of hard work. So apologies, I foisted that upon.
We never read the fine print.
You guys have to forgive me. My mythology is rusty. Who's the character? Is it Sisyphus that's always pushing the boulder up the hill?
Yeah.
That is podcasting.
So. Yeah.
It's exactly
That is podcasting. There. All right. Before Neil was gracious enough to come on, and I can't thank you enough. And we chose, well, you chose the movie Aterrados, Terrified by Demian Rugna. But Neil, I've got you here now, and because you really were and still are the inspiration for this podcast and all you do, I've got to ask you, how did it start for you? Like, what was that light bulb moment where you wanted to give it a shot?
It's a weird one. So I've never been a doer. I'm somebody who has plans. I just don't do anything. I'm just quite lazy. It's not the most exciting story. I had a job working for a major kind of retailer as a copywriter in the UK. And I hated it, and a job I'd ever had. I'm a terrible employee. I've got an issue with authority. I'm just a dreadful human being in the office. I'd always planned to quit and try and write a book. So I've been saving money for ages and living a very sort of monk-like existence, trying to just have enough money to take a year off work. And then the pandemic hit, and I thought, well, why not quit in a moment of global uncertainty and economic strife? Why not choose that moment and, really stress your wife out? And I quit my job, and I tried to write a book, and I did try and write a book, and I wrote half a book, and then I wrote half of another book, which is a full book in words, but not a book in content, But then essentially that is such a mammoth task that I thought I need something that is, like a weekly hit of dopamine, like you've achieved something. And I thought, well, why not? I thought, why not be a white male cliche and start a podcast? And I've got I have no discernible skill set apart from I've got a doctorate in horror fiction. And I was like, well, that has done me no good ever, apart from ruining my mind and my bank balance. So why not put it to use? And so I wrote to, and I'd spoken to Paul Tremblay, for those who don't know, the author of Head Full of Ghosts, so the guy who wrote the better book of the M. Night Shyamalan film, Knock on the Cabin. Paul's book is better. And I happened to have his email address because I've spoken to him once before, and I emailed him and he said yes. And he gave me John Langan's email address, and it just went from there. And no said no to me.
Right?
Which is a reason that everyone should start a podcast, because people guess are way kinder than you would think they would be.
For sure.
When we started out, Shannon and I had no idea what we were doing. So we kind of just did everything. And we reached out to people in Hollywood and actors and directors and practical effects people and everybody. Nobody was ever a jerk. But the one community that said yes immediately and has never stopped, and we've been doing this now for a year and a half, was the horror literature community.
Yeah.
And just like your experience, we started out with Andy Davidson, which led us to John Langan, which led us to Paul Tremblay, to Jonathan Jaynes, to Clay McLeod Chapman. Then when you get a Clay McLeod Chapman, it's like the keys to the kingdom, and then you get a Nat Cassidy, and
Robert Atone, and met so many cool people.
And to be fair and to give you all the credit in the world, you were like, you were our Goonies map. You were, we followed you. Oh, Sadie Hartman. What's Sadie all about? Oh my gosh, she's a walking encyclopedia of horror literature, which led us to, Emily Hughes and then like a Nicole Wolverton. It just keeps going and going and going. And then you kind of fall in love with these people, and then you have them back on again, and then you start developing like a community. You have a community that, I don't know where you go from here, because you've now had Stephen King on. So
me and Mr. King are sort of on good terms now. We email now and again, and it's crazy because
that's awesome.
It's crazy. And and people joke like because of the whole fallout with Twitter and Blue Sky. I've got people saying to me like, ask Steve to join Blue Sky. And I'm like, I'm not gonna ask him to join Blue Sky. I'm not gonna like use my tenuous, as you say, key in the door to get him on Blue Sky, because people don't realize that I am still just a fan of all these people. Some of them, a lot of the names you mentioned, I would consider friends, but I'm also a fan of these people, and they are still like the stars in the horror firmament, you know. But then King is like the North Star, and I spent my life. He was this mythical character. He wasn't a real person, you know. And then to speak to him and just to like have him retweet you and saying it's the most insane ride of my life, and every day it makes my life better, because it's like few people get to actually meet and become relatively on good terms, you know, like in terms of contact with their heroes. It's such a privilege. It's such a privilege. But I will just say, you keep talking about using me as some kind of you know, guiding light. I do not know and have never known what I'm doing.
There's the magic.
I just keep thinking if I'm nice to people, it will be okay. And it does seem to be 90% of the battle is being nice to people. But really, I know nothing.
All right. This is where you're going to be like, you're laying it on thick, O'Connor, but it's true. Okay. So you started in 2020, and look, you've written for Vulture and Slate and Esquire and The Guardian. You know, like, you're an accomplished writer in your own right. You've got, you know, you're working on your novel. You have these things which you're doing, but your podcast, Talking Scared, has become like it's like a launching pad for indie authors, and then it's like a megaphone for mainstream authors. But it really feels like, and forgive me, because I know you're both going to make fun of me, but it feels like Rolling Stone in the 70s and 80s. Like your podcast is the go-to place. You got to be on Talking Scared. If you're a horror author, you have to be on Talking Scared. That's the way it feels. You know, I'll stand by that.
Yeah.
Well, that's two things. One, I'm British, so this is all very uncomfortable for me. And people we're not this nice to each other. My wife isn't this nice to me. And yeah, but the other thing is that like I am just a guy in my really untidy spare room where, as you can see, the light doesn't really work. And you know, there is this, a lot of people talk about the show like there's this kind of prestige and mystique around it. And don't get me wrong, I'm very proud of the show, and I really appreciate that people like it. But I am just a guy in a room bumbling through life, you know, so anyone could, basically, what I'm saying, as I say to everyone, if you've got an idea for a podcast, no. I was going to say, if you've got an idea for a podcast, start the podcast. No, don't. If you've got an idea for a podcast that people want to hear, there's far too many people just talking at walls. But I think if people have got an idea for something, they think there's a niche for that, they should start it, because the community out there is raring to go. That's my little, inspirational mantra for the day.
Yeah, if you're just willing to put in the work and the time to it, you know, like it's become, I would say it's become like our babies now. Like it's definitely, I've gotten to the point now where I say like I have a second job, like this, this is a second job to me, and because we do take it, very seriously, but we keep it going so we can still have fun. You know, like you said,
this is the job I like.
People. Yeah, same. But meeting incredible people, it's definitely been a journey for sure, and one that we're excited to continue.
Now, Shannon, I'm going to apologize to you because Shannon likes to keep the podcast light, and I do as well. But Neil, you're our first guest. This will be on a month from now, but you're the first guest that we've had on after the election. I mean, you certainly know what's going on, and I follow you on Instagram, so I know how you feel and what your empathy and your sympathy, and that resonates with me. It's going to be a tough time. Who knows what the next 3.5 years is going to look like. I will say this though, I wanted to get your opinion on it because this past week on social media, at first it was doom and gloom and devastation, and then that slowly started to evolve into, a message of, hope, and, chaotic times tend to really inspire the most creativity, and I just want to get your take on it, and please send good vibes our way.
Well, I can send good vibes, and don't, this is my pet, my hobby horse, so don't let me talk we could be in an hour and I still haven't drawn breath. You know what I mean?
No,
I think
please have at it, please.
I've been so overwhelmed and consumed by populist politics of the last 8 years since 2016. I feel like I've had this whole other life where I'm just a furious ball of angst reading the papers every day, like with Trump and with Boris Johnson over here. So a few things, I'll keep it brief. One, America will survive. And I don't say that in a trivial way, because I know that for people of color, women, half the population, trans people, anyone basically who is vulnerable to the stripping away of social architecture, I know that it's going to be awful in very real terms for those people. So these messages of like grandiose macro level hope of, I get why that is infuriating people, particularly from a Brit who is like, an old way. What does it matter what I think? But America will be okay. And the reason I'm sure of that is that we got rid of our populist when he pushed us too far. And everyone thinks, oh yeah, America's so much worse. And it's not. America is more bombastic. America's louder in its politics and in its extremes.
Yes.
But Boris Johnson pushed our democracy to the limits. And, we got rid of him. All it took was one tipping point. Sorry, game over. And now we've got a very moderate left-leaning government. That brings its own problems, but, we're a lot better than we were. The other thing about the art and creativity, I won't name names, but I saw a writer the other day who is a sort of famously provocative figure in the horror community write this very angry blog post thing about how there's a lot of white liberal progressives saying that, inspirational posts about art and things like that, and she's basically saying art has never killed a Nazi. I think it may have been aimed at me, because I posted a picture of Woody Guthrie's guitar with "This machine kills fascists," and I just wrote, write this on your pen. And this person was very angry about this sort of the complacency of people like me saying things, inspirational posts about the hope of creativity, because in their opinion that never did anything. And I couldn't disagree more.
Oh, same.
Because I think, because stories are how we make sense of chaos. They're how we survive chaos, and narrative is everything. Anyone who doesn't understand that the world runs on narrative as much as it does fossil fuels.
Yeah.
That is politics. Politics is narrative. Social studies is narrative. It's all narrative. It's why when my wife, who has a science background, says to me, "What was the point of your degree?" Because I did English, I always say to her, it taught me how to understand the world better. And I think the reason that we need writers and filmmakers and musicians and podcasters and anyone who's got a voice, something to say, is because I genuinely believe the only way you beat an evil story is to write a better one. Yeah. And I get how trivial that may sound at a time when people are looking down the barrel of fascism. But, you think back through history, we know who the bad people were because of the narrative, whether it's an historical, factual narrative or a metaphorical, allegorical narrative. Don't tell me that George Orwell's Animal Farm didn't make a difference, is what I'm basically saying.
Yeah.
That's my take on it. My hope is that, words and art and music, it makes a difference. And also, can I swear? Can I curse on this?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Also, it makes the time and the darkness a whole lot fucking more palatable if you've got something to read, right?
Absolutely.
That's I also think. So is that a message of hope that works for you?
Yeah.
It does. It does. I needed that right into my veins. Thank you.
So, politics aside, if you want to segue into our topic, do you think it's worse or better than living in a nest of a portal between the land of the living and the land of the dead? What's worse?
I would
same.
Because
I would take that Buenos Aires suburb over Mar-a-Lago any day of the week.
Any fucking day. You got that right.
I gotta tell you though, watching this movie again, even like it's like one of those movies. If we weren't clear sinners, we're gonna be talking about. I believe you said it already. We're gonna be talking about Terrified,
and we will be spoiling the hell out of it.
Yeah. Yes, aka Aterrados. If you haven't seen it, please stop, watch it, come back. Because we're gonna spoil it. But watching it again to prep for this conversation, I like knowing what was gonna happen. I was still terrified. Again, like haha, whatever. But like, but I'm because I tend to watch it on certain nights. I was alone. My husband was out. Doing something with a friend. So and then I decided to go to bed, and now I'm just like lying with my covers just. Like just blinking wide every
blink, yeah.
Yeah, like every noise, like, and now you have like leaves falling over here. Like we're in autumn now, and the leaves are like falling rapidly now. So like like a leaf, it'll be a simple leaf just like scratching at my window, and I'm like, like overthinking, overreacting,
You should be more concerned about your faucet, but okay. All right.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I know.
All right. Neil, I want your take. We'll unpack it, but let's go with your take. So how did you like the film? What do you think about it?
So I feel like I'm kind of disappointing you. I didn't love it.
Be.
So I came to it with real trepidation because, well, for a couple of things. One, I'm genuinely quite disturbed by horror movies these days. I become quite susceptible to horror. I talk about this on my podcast all the time, that it feels like the trigger points I used to have with horror, which were quite few and far between, are just becoming more and more and more. So the point where I feel almost hemmed in by the things that I don't want to encounter in case they freak me out. And often my fear is not, what will I see in the next 90 minutes? My fear at minute one, this is really hard to explain, but at minute one, I feel very tense because I have like an anxiety thing, and I latch on to horror movies in a big way. So at minute one of a movie, I am terrified that sometime in the next 90 minutes, I'm going to see something that will ruin my week, that I'll fixate on and not be able to shake off. And it's happened many times. I remember when I watched Longlegs recently, halfway through, I was like, oh no, I'm watching a possession movie, and I wasn't prepared for that, So I was really nervous, very terrified, because loads of people say this film is so scary. Paul Tremblay first recommended this film to me. I always ask him what truly scares you, and he said this film. And I was like, Christ, if it scares Paul Tremblay, it's got to reduce me to a puddle. And I put it on. We can get into detail. There's one scene right at the start that's amazing. But on the whole, for reasons we can unpick, it just didn't move the dial for me at all.
Okay. All right. That's fair.
Yeah.
That makes it a better conversation, because I really want to find out, okay, what didn't land for you? And that's completely fair. Everybody comes on this podcast. You just give your honest opinion, and there's no judgment whatsoever. Mm-hmm. It's funny, the guests that we've had on, we've had a lot of the same guests on, like Nicole Wolverton. This movie chills her to the bone. Paul Tremblay. It's come up a couple of times with different authors where they're like, oh, that one from Argentina, oh, that messed me up. And then Demian Rugna is now kind of carving out this little niche of, this is not a guy to take lightly. He's like, very much like what's happening with Osgood Perkins. Like, okay, these guys make some seriously creepy films that will, they're gonna mess your night up, more or less. So, all right, let's start with the beginning, because the setup is, look, you've got just a typical suburban neighborhood in Buenos Aires, and typical married couple, going about their daily routine. The wife has this odd occurrence where she hears whispering coming out of the faucet, which right there is a deal breaker for me. If I hear voices coming out of my sink, we're going to the Holiday Inn that night. But like in all horror movies, you just rationalize it away. And then Juan that night starts, when his wife goes to the bathroom, he starts hearing banging. And Neil, I don't know if this is the scene that you're talking about, but like this movie begins, forgive me, it does begin with a bang, and it is the wife going back and forth, smashing into the shower, and she's dead, and then she's just a bloodied mess. And it's almost like the film is announcing, okay, I don't know what you were expecting, but we're going there immediately, and it's going to exponentially get wackier and wackier and more terrifying as we go along. Whether or not that lands for you, but like that is the direction that we're heading in, because it happens in the first 5 minutes of the film.
Yeah. I love the transition too that it takes, where it starts with, like you said, Juan and his wife, and the wife actually hears like the whispering saying, like, she says they're saying they're gonna kill me.
Yeah.
Right? Like so she gets like a premonition, but it goes right to them. But before that happens, he's complaining about his neighbor, I believe it was Walter.
Walter, yeah.
Right? And so Walter, they have a quick conversation that Walter is like redoing his whole house or whatever, but now so he's thinking the banging is Walter, like friggin' him like remodeling his house at friggin' 5 a.m. or whatever it was. And then, but now like the story now transitions to Walter and what Walter was actually going through. And that was a whole supernatural thing where he couldn't sleep. His bed was moving. He would wake up and like everything, his whole room would be in chaos. And that scared the shit out of me, that part. Like even just him being in his bed, because again, like your bed is supposed to be like a safe place. Like that's like you get that when you're a child, like you immediately run to your bed, you friggin' pull the covers over your head and you're home base, I'm safe, right? And some horror movies have completely stripped that away from us.
Yeah.
And this is one of those films where like he's just lying in bed trying to go to sleep, and all of a sudden the whole bed starts moving. And why he keeps looking under the fucking bed, I don't know, because I don't think I could ever do that. But even that shot where he keeps looking himself, doesn't see anything, but then the camera angle for the viewer all of a sudden like will pan up when he's on top of the bed, and then you see something under the bed, and that's it. It was things like that just made my skin crawl.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting you say skin crawl, because what I did like about the film, I read a lot about how there's loads of jump scares. Jump scares don't get me. It's like someone cauterized my nerve endings. I just sit there impassive while things explode. I can count on like two hands the amount of jump scares that have got to me. I just don't react. But I'd love a skin crawl. Something that is like just revealed without the cymbal crash. It's just like, here's this thing. Yeah. And I always think, even though I hate the film Hereditary, I always think the scene in Hereditary with Toni Collette on the ceiling where she slowly becomes visible, greatest skin crawl of all time. The tall figure in It Follows who just emerges. It's not really a jump scare. The pacing is wrong, but you know what I mean. That the pacing is off for a jump scare. It's slightly more gradual, and I think and a lot of the scenes in Terrified are slightly more gradual than a typical jump scare would be. And that really works for me because it makes you kind of go, oh, rather than jerk. I find it way more impactful.
Yeah,
I agree.
For sure.
I have to ask you two quick questions though, because Walter's situation is the most frightening for me, because I can I love to be in bed, but I can never have my foot hanging off the bed, like arm or feet. Can you guys hang your arms or feet off the bed?
Mine, I have to be in a cocoon.
Okay.
With all my blankets, like I have to I cocoon myself. I'm like a little burrito.
I'm largely trying to sleep in the little bit of room that my tiny terrier dog has left me, so often I'm out. Do you know the Stephen King quote about this? About Stephen King famously wrote, I can't remember, it might have been Dance Macabre, but and I use this all the time to summarize my fear response to horror movies, and the thing I said about how stuff ruins me for a week. Stephen King said, I know there is no, hang on, what did he say? He said, I know there is no monster underneath my bed, but if I keep my foot inside the covers, the monster can't grab it.
Yeah.
And that's how I feel. I know it's not real. I know that when I finished this film, because a lot of stuff involves like tap water, when it finished, I was like, I don't really want to get a glass of tap water. And I'm like, why? It's a film that everyone's seeing, But like, some part of my brain that is like, yeah, I'd rather not do the thing that is in the film, And yeah.
And it's never the films that you think it's going to happen with, for me, it's like these just obscure, like, I don't know, Hammer horror film or an Amicus, and I'm just like, oh, this just messed me up so badly. Mm-hmm. I don't know why, but it's never like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Yeah, it was insanely frightening when I saw it, because I probably saw it way too young. But I also kind of, it washed over me. And I think just because it just became part of the culture and the horror culture specifically, you kind of become immune to it. But it's just these one-offs that no one really knows about. Like we had Philip Fracassi on, we were talking about Drag Me to Hell. And he desperately wants to get his hands on this segment of a made-for-TV anthology about a child that comes back from the dead. I mean, it's very, it's reminiscent of Pet Sematary. And I searched it out and I watched it. And it's a made-for-TV movie from the late 70s, and it's frightening as hell. And I'm like, Philip, I see you, buddy. Like, yeah, this just, no one knows about this little, piece of the anthology, but it's so insanely frightening, and it just will mess up your night. It will absolutely mess your night up. So I hope he does get it, because, he's a great writer, and I think he could do some fantastic things with it. But it's always the ones you least expect,
Yeah,
Yeah,
it is.
for
Once again,
sure.
be your guard. I mean, going back to that first scene with the wife bouncing off the walls, and then thinking about the stuff what you were saying, Shannon, about the state of the bed, dawned on me right away. And the reason I was nervous right at the start is because my primal horror moment was in Nightmare on Elm Street when I was about 12 years old. Watched it with my grandmother. Freddy Krueger. I was already scared of Freddy Krueger before I saw the film, because he was in the culture. He was kind of like our Slender Man. He was just this cultural icon. And I watched it, and that scene of Tina flying around the bedroom being cut open is the most primal scene of horror in my life. And I think that Demian Rugna is definitely nodding to that in that opening to Terrified.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, okay, well, it's that kind of movie, right? And then when we got to a bed, and I'm like, oh god, it's all my worst fears coming back again. But after that, it got way more tame in my perspective.
Well, you're right though, because we start off with this bang. Forgive the pun, but we do start off with a bang, and then the movie does calm down a little bit, and then we we get exposition, and we start to expand on we have the police involved, and we have the paranormal investigators, and not to like speed things up, but we quickly go from the jarring opening to, okay, this is more of like the the part of Poltergeist where we're getting into the science of it all.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's part of that's actually one of the things I wanted to say that I really did enjoy from this movie. So like right in the very beginning, I believe it sets a tone, where it's like, it's, you just get that unsettled feeling. Like the wife, I believe it was Alicia was her name. You could tell she's very unsettled, and obviously for good reason. And, but she basically finds out when she is dead. But now, like, granted, it does slow down. But what I love too, especially again watching it again, because I obviously have to read it. I don't know Argentinian, but reading it again, the subtitles, I don't feel like it's not the type of movie where it slows down, but no dialogue is wasted. Everything, I think everything that they say. And whether, like, if they say something that you're learning about a character, you learn about Walter, now it clicks to Walter, and you now understand. When it goes into the relationship with the cop and the mother who lost her son, and then and now the son is like, he reacts as soon as the cop goes, oh yeah, me and her had a really nice relationship, milk spills. Yeah. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's not a time wasted, even though like nothing really happens. Again, they're talking, it slows down a bit, but it's important to carry the story. The narrative is there, and I love how when it comes together like that.
The craft that Rugna shows in this movie, being, I think it was I want to say it was his second feature. He'd done a couple of short films. I think it was the second or third feature. I mean, he's an accomplished director for sure, especially when you're dealing with, multiple locations on the same block and multiple characters, and to keep it all coherent and to keep this, the propulsive nature of the story going, and for it to make sense, and the viewers not getting lost. Wait, where are we? And who is this now? I thought he did a very good job with that. And Neil, to your point, whether or not it was scary enough or it was jarring enough, but he does keep it clean. You know, I wasn't confused as to whose storyline we were following. And then it really did all kind of escalate and wrap up when we do get to the end, and we're at the crossroads of like, all right, so we basically have like another dimension and it's spilling through, and the paranormal investigators seem to have some sort of tenuous plan, but are all killed, but are they? Because even though they're killed, they're still there, in phantom form. And can I think the police officer's name was Funes, I think. And can he actually, if he just were to stop having heart attacks and listen for a moment, could,
Imagine you saying it to somebody, excuse me, can you just stop having that heart attack?
But I mean, if he could just calm down and listen, then possibly he could save the day, because it seems like they do have the key to resolving this. But what I love about Funes, the police officer, is that he's the audience surrogate. Yeah. He's panicking just like we are. He's like, this is fucking insanity, and I cannot wait to get the hell out of Argentina, and you'll never see me again, and I'm burning this place to the ground. He has a very human response to very supernatural things that are happening, and I love him the most because I see myself in him. I'm like, I would absolutely do the same thing. I would listen to no one and do everything wrong, it turns out,
I liked his character a lot too.
I also think he brings a bit of comedy to it as well, because his reactions sometimes are quite intentionally funny, like just the wide-eyed kind of what, so I thought I like that. I'm glad you mentioned Poltergeist though, because that is the thing that it reminded me the most of, and I love Poltergeist.
Oh, me too.
And
fantastic film.
So I'm a bit of a hypocrite in why right, I was going to say why I dislike Terrified. I don't dislike Terrified. It's fun time. But it shares the same thing with this kind of like cod scientific explanation that also makes no sense. It's kind of like the roughest sketch of science, which you have in Poltergeist as well. Like, you never really know. There's a vein of surrealism and bizarro stuff running through Poltergeist that I like. And it's similar in this. It's just that in this, I just found it a little bit too opaque. I don't need it all tied off in a nice bow. I mean, that's not what I want, because the film is aiming for strangeness, and sometimes keeping things vague enhances strangeness. But it felt like there was a lot of plate spinning, and I just didn't quite know what to follow. And I think the biggest problem was, at no point did I know what the stakes were beyond
that's fair.
The house.
Okay. That's fair.
Neil, that is fair. Oh, excuse me 1 second, guys. Charlie needs to get out of the room. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
It's okay. I know. I guess we're boring our dogs today.
Yeah.
Yeah, Charlie's the roughest critic, that son of a bitch. I love him though.
To your point, I would say I think the differences between this film and Poltergeist. Poltergeist kind of gave us a why this is all happening, where this one doesn't. It's just, apparently there's a portal, and here we're in the nest that involves like this little like area in the neighborhood. You drive away, you're kind of safe, even though in the end you find out like apparently now they can expand out because one of them gets followed, basically.
Neil brings up a great point though, that they fail to illustrate the stakes.
Yeah, like, I could see that.
It's just, this is happening. There's no why. There's no rhyme or reason to it. You just have to deal with this is happening. So it makes sense that the police officer, that Funes at the end, is just like, I'm just going to burn it down. It solves nothing. But
he tried.
It's a very human reaction. Now, my favorite thing, Poltergeist is probably in my top 5, Neil. I was lucky enough this summer in New York at the Film Forum. They showed it in 35 millimeter, and it was like just letting it wash over you. It was incredible. But my favorite thing about Poltergeist, and it always will be, is that Zelda Rubinstein as the psychic is the biggest fucking liar. Because that house is not clean whatsoever.
Like nowhere near it.
I mean,
Yeah.
Toby Hooper does a very purposeful hero shot of her announcing to the family that this house is clean and the music is swelling and the lighting is fantastic. And then 5 minutes later, Jo Beth Williams gets out of the tub and is getting zoomed up the wall. And I'm like, that fucking liar!
Right? And the son's getting attacked by a clown doll, and I'm like,
I wish there was a smash cut to her at the bank doing one of these with the check.
Yeah, and I loved the three investigators in this because there's a weird thing. This in Terrified because I don't want it to be negative. I want it positive as well because here you go. This is what I think. The film was hokier than I thought it was going to be, but in a good way. In a good way. Okay. So I thought it was going to be this like really. I haven't seen Where Evil Lurks, but I've heard enough about it that I thought this was going to be absolute cold, brutal, cruel. Insert adjective, like unforgiving, not fun, like the opposite of fun horror, out to disturb you and upset you. And actually, it's more like Poltergeist, that it is quite fun. I describe that kind of horror as like a ghost train horror, where you get on and you laugh as much as you scream. Yeah? Yeah. It's more like that I thought it was going to be, which I like, because I think I'm not really a lover of like really dreary, Dark and the Wicked type horror. I like it to be a bit more fun. And I just loved the scenes with the female, I can't remember her name. She had like an American name, the character, the female investigator, Albrecht. Yeah,
Albrecht, yes.
Dr. Albrecht. Yes. Where she's just got like the pendulums going and like the arcane tools of the trade, and they're spinning around and things are clicking and ticking, and it was like something from like an Amicus movie back in the day. It felt quite cheesy in a way I didn't expect, and I really enjoyed that. I thought those are my favourite parts. With following the investigators doing their job in their like quite ill-advised and silly sort of ways. Loved it.
Yeah, I can't get enough of that. And your movies like The Haunting of Hill House. What's another great one?
House on Haunted Hill, that kind of thing.
Thank you. Yes, where they bring the scientists in to try and decipher what's going on, and it just goes so insanely wrong. I just love all that stuff. Absolutely love it.
Yeah. They were in way over their heads.
I love a good haunting as well, and not to. And Neil, I apologize, but this is what we do on the podcast. We see an exit ramp and we race for it. I love a good haunting. I love a good haunted house movie, and especially we just got done with October. So it was like movies like The Changeling. I watched Ghost Story for the first time since probably 1985. And it's not like I was avoiding it, but it just hadn't been on my radar. And I sat down and I watched it, and it's to your point, it's hokey. I mean, but it's purposefully hokey because it's almost like, the Chatter Society is, let's all gather around the campfire and try and scare each other. Oh, by the way, we have this dark, horrific secret that's right on our shoulder that we never talk about, by the way. Yeah. But some of the practical effects and some of like that late 70s, early 80s matte painting and photo trickery that they use in the movie, I hadn't seen in decades, and I couldn't love that movie more now. It is not great. Yeah. Full disclosure, it's not great, but it has so many of those little elements from things that we don't get anymore. Miniatures and things like that. That it's
the filmmaking. It's the tactile filmmaking. I love it. Yeah. And beautiful. You say you love a good haunting. I love a good haunting. So like my favorite horror movies aren't horror movies. They're gothic movies. So I love The Haunting of Hill House. Just Robert Wise, masterpiece. I love The Others. I love The Woman in Black. Have you seen The Awakening? The one set. So I watched that again for Halloween, and I really
we're talking
about
the one with Rebecca Hall, right?
Yeah.
She's so good in that.
I mean, talk about jump scares. The bit with the pillow in that, I nearly soiled my trousers, but that's the one of the few that got to me. But give me a good haunting any day of the week over a man with an axe or anything like. What I want this is so petty because it's my personal problem, and this is the reason I liked Terrified. I want a return to ghosts. I'm tired of demons. I don't know when this happened that it's always demons, because demons, that for a start, as I've talked to death on my own show, I'm just uber terrified of possession narrative stuff.
Why is that?
For reasons
I've said this so many times.
Yeah, it's because it's a mental health thing. It's because I read the Annalise Michelle case, where, you know, the thing that Emily Rose is based on. Yeah. And that girl was not possessed. She was unwell, and she died because, and it got into my, I've said this so many times, if you know me, sorry listeners, but it got into my head that there is fundamentally no difference between being possessed or being truly convinced you are possessed. They both end up in the same place. And so I just, it's become like a phobia for me, that kind of stuff. But also, demons aren't as interesting as ghosts because they kind of don't have a story. Whereas ghosts are like a living manifestation of something that means something, you know?
Yes.
So I want more ghosts. I want a malicious presence that has its own backstory rather than just we are a manifestation of hate, you know?
It's richer. And it's deeper and richer.
It's exactly. And Terrified kind of bridges the gap because I don't even know what those things are, but the film feels much more like a traditional haunting than a kind of possessed house vibe, you know? I don't know if you may not even agree, but they feel more like ghosts than they do like demons.
No, I agree.
But I don't know. I mean, what do you think they are?
I was actually wondering that same thing because I mean, in a way, you kind of get like a you know, one of them comes back from the grave, literally, and like so you're like, wait, is it a zombie then, or like So that's the part that's never really explained, honestly.
Well, that's why Poltergeist, you know, it makes the distinction of like, okay, these are dispossessed spirits, and they're not happy at all.
Yeah.
You know, and then of course Toby Hooper is just like, let's just, you know, let's put the boots to capitalism, and you know, well, in these prefab neighborhoods, and I'm like, yeah, Toby, you know. So there's great stuff layered on top there. But I will say with Terrified, it is more about the scares and the creep factor than the actual explanation, because I couldn't tell you guys where they're coming from, what their purpose is, or why they're even there to begin with.
Yeah,
you know?
I do believe that Demian Rugna, I'm pretty sure I heard this in an interview, that he talked about that he actually tried remaking this film. Because I do think he even believes that it does need to be tweaked, and it's possible if he gets another crack at it that maybe we'll get a little bit more of an explanation. But it just never came to be, and then he ended up writing When Evil Lurks, and the studios wanted to move forward with that. So that's how we got When Evil Lurks last year.
Now you haven't seen that, Neil. So I'm going to wave you off of that because there are zero laughs in When Evil Lurks. We actually
there's no fun.
we unpacked it with Clay McLeod Chapman, and Clay, you know, Clay just is Clay. So he has such fantastic insight on the film and the meaning, but it is not a joyous time. You know, it's always a joyous time with Clay, but that movie is a fucking bummer extraordinaire. So well, I'll wave you off. What we'll do is you and I will look for more movies in the English countryside where someone shows up wearing damn tweed. That's what I want more of.
Yes, exactly that. Yeah, someone's affairs have to be got in order. You know, ideally. No, I've seen the still. I've seen enough of that still of that pit bull and that little girl, and I don't know what happens next, but I've got my ideas. And a perverse part of me wants to see it, but then I kind of think, I'm probably okay.
You won't soon shake it when you see it. That's for sure. I mean, it lands. But what I do love about Demian Rugna is that he is comfortable. He is comfortable with emotion. You know, it's not. These aren't just cold characters, especially in When Evil Lurks. You know, you really get into the character. He likes to build character, not so much with Terrified. It's a little bit more two-dimensional, but When Evil Lurks he really does spend his time with character development, and it does make it a richer experience. It is like I said, it is a monumental bummer of a film, but it's good. It's good, and it really leaves a mark. but I do like what he does with character. He's comfortable with them. He's, you know, you don't have a lot of time with the multitude of characters that we have in Terrified, but you feel like you know them. You know, they all have their little idiosyncrasies, so you do feel like you know them, and they pop when they're on screen. So I do like that. You know, that landed for me.
No, he definitely puts a lot of time and effort into like the emotions, like believability, and where I like just about every single character that's on the screen. Like I you know, I definitely feel for Juan. I know that the movie bookends with him.
My heart breaks for Juan. This guy's so monumentally screwed.
Yeah, and he clearly ends up like in a mental institution, and you think he's safe now because he's away from the, you know, away from the nest, or the, you know, from the neighborhood, if you will. But yeah, and then all of a sudden he's like, did he come with you? You know, and you turn around, you don't see anybody there. You're like, well, shit.
Yeah.
You know,
I was trying to work out, do you see something or not? Because I was like, are we supposed to be seeing this?
No.
Right.
No.
Okay.
Yo,
So that's in dialogue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, that's only in dialogue where he points at his picture. So you know who it is when he points at him. It's the oh my god, I can't remember everybody's name, but the first
or something like that. Yeah.
The first investigator, right? That comes to look at the boy that came back from the dead. He points it out and saying it's him. Who and I think he was the last one taken as well.
And then but also the fact, most back to my point of being fun, the fact that like it could end there on that chilling note, you know, like he's there and that would be a chilling way to end. But instead, here, have a chair, you know, and it's like it's a fun, it's like a punchline at the end. And I didn't expect that tone of like trying to make the audience laugh as well. What you know what I mean by laugh? A savvy horror director will know that an audience will laugh at that, you know, and I enjoy that he's giving us that on top of what could be a very bleak ending to a film.
I agree. This movie, upon reflection, is a lot funnier than I gave it credit for, especially when you compare it to When Evil Lurks. I'm very curious to see what he does next. I, in my heart, think that he would, I know it's been done to death, but I would love to see what he could do with Pet Sematary. You know, because he just wallows in suffering and dread. And I mean, if you're going to pick a Stephen King work that is just bathed in it, this is his wheelhouse. But we'll see. I mean, the last reboot of it was too soon. But Neil, I have to. We've got about 12 minutes left. I want to wrap up Terrified. You know, we're going to give it a. You know, I had a lot of fun with it. I think you appreciated it to a certain extent, but, you know, didn't quite land. Shannon, I think you and I are on the same page. Like, we did enjoy it, but, Neil, there's no way I'm letting you go. We got to spend at least 10 minutes if you'll allow it. Because you are just racing through novel after novel. What have you read in 2024 that just blew your socks off?
Okay. God, bear with me. My memory of any book ever been written has gone out of my head. Give me a second. I've got. Let me get my sturdy list that is always up. What have I read this year? It's been amazing. I'm trying to think of the really. Oh, right. Sorry, I'm being an idiot. So the first thing that comes to mind, and everyone is just sick of me saying this. Have you read Josh Malerman's Incidents Around the House?
Just finished it a couple of weeks ago.
Did you? Yeah, I haven't gotten to it yet, but I'm hearing great things about that one.
Oh, Other Mommy is going to fuck you up. I'm just going to leave it there. I'm just going to leave it there.
Oh, Lord.
I've said, I wrote this in Esquire, I've said it out loud. I don't truck with the word best, because we all know and agree that Stephen King's It is the best horror book and best book ever written. But Incidents Around the House is the most effective horror novel I have ever read.
Wow. Okay.
It's just chilling in a way that eludes articulation. And the only way I can describe it is the first time you see The Exorcist and you're like, that film contains way more than the things I just saw. Something is in there. I don't mean the little pop-up Pazuzu in the corner. I mean, something in the fabric of that story is so much bigger than the images I've just seen. That's how incidents feels like it is so much more than some of its parts. I just find it amazing. So that's like my favorite books ever. What else have I read this year that's blown me away? God, it's been a long year. I have, God,
just this week
Stephen
was
Graham,
a long year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Stephen Graham Jones, amazing. Brought his Jay Daniels thing to the end in a way that I didn't think anyone could pull off, and he smashed it out of the park.
Yes,
and the standalone, I've seen it. Felt that something with such like a B movie title would you'd think it would be really, really good. What else have I read? Here's one that is a bit more obscure that I would recommend to people. It's a novel, a set of short stories called Mystery Lights by Lena Valencia. And I'm recommending that because people haven't heard of this because it's only adjacently horror. They're kind of weird New Yorker style short stories that are very much like vignettes about people, but they've all got this weirdness in them, and they're just beautiful. They're really lovely stories. Keith Rosson's Fever House and The Devil All the Time that King has been proclaiming, you know. I think the second one is I spoke to Keith about this, and he said that his editor asked him to take like about 100 pages out, and I think massive error because it feels too compressed.
Put him back in.
He's a phenomenal writer, you know, like it's not his fault. You can just tell it right at the end. But he's amazing. What else? CJ Lee. Here you go. Right, here you go. 2 for you that came right into the year that I'm going to recommend, and they couldn't be more different. One is a book called This Cursed House by Del Sandine, which is about, it's set in the 1960s. It's about a young black woman answers an ad she moved from Chicago to New Orleans to take up a job in a isolated manor house, very, very much, you know, woman in black type stuff. And there's a family there who are living a curse. And I shall say no more. But it's a proper, fun, red-blooded, enjoyable ghost story that's just great fun. But it also has this vein of sort of social commentary of racism, but colorism, about the way that darker-skinned people are treated differently within their own community. So it's got the Jordan Peele-esque social commentary with this just really brilliantly fun page-turning ghost story. And if I may, the last one I'm going to recommend, I know I'm talking a lot.
No, that's what you're here for.
Yeah, please do. That's fine.
Just you talked about, like, you know, where evil lurks and how like unremitting it is. C.J. Lead, who wrote Mayfly, you know, the female Patrick Bateman book, she brought out a book in October this year called American Rapture. And on paper, I'm almost loath to recommend it because it sounds so triggering, because the premise basically is that this plague breaks out in America and it creates mass sexual disinhibition. So it leads to like an apocalypse of sexual assault. Now, people are wincing, right? People, I know, bear with me. It's in no way exploitative. There are scenes of sexual... there are scenes of both sexual assault and sexual, you know, ill behavior, because they are different things in this book. But there's the whole gamut of that. And it could be triggering, and I wouldn't tell anyone to read it who had any issues around that topic. But it's not gratuitous. It's this weirdly quite heartwarming story of kind of found family on the road as this young virginal Catholic schoolgirl escapes her very, very sheltered family life and escapes this plague of, basically, as Stephen King described it when I told him about this, rape zombies. And it's just amazing. It's just a wonderful book because it's like action-packed, but it's heartfelt and it's funny. And it's not as gratuitous as that synopsis makes it sound. It really isn't. It's wonderful. And my God, is it timely now.
Wow.
Because of what? Well, post-election, because it's all about, when I spoke to CJ on the show, and she talked about how phrase she uses that sexuality or beauty is a currency and a curse, right? And, you know, and she satirizes all of that. But my God, reading it through Trump's America when these pricks are tweeting "your body, my choice," It's a whole different kind of horror story, you know. So that's the most timely of the moment book of the year, American Rapture by C.J. Lead. Do not let my synopsis put people off. It's a different book than how I described it.
Not at all. And I follow CJ on Instagram, and she has been having a time. I mean, I know she was with Clay not that long ago in Brooklyn, and they did a reading, and she just really she seems to be having a fantastic time right now promoting the book and just living a great life, which
she's a really bright, lovely, cheerful person who writes the most awful stuff, you know. But when we're off air, I'll tell you about the thing in that book that ruined me, but it would be too much of a spoiler to say it now.
Okay, fair enough.
But yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Don't you find that I mean, I know we touched on the beginning of the episode, but the most surprising thing about being in this community and then doing this and reaching out to these authors who write things that will take the paint off the wall. They're the loveliest people.
They really are.
Loveliest people you're ever going to meet. One after the next. No one has, honestly, I mean, you know, it's funny. I did a short interview with Nat Cassidy to promote his novella Rest Stop, which, by the way, Nat, I'm still angry at you. That book fucked me up. It's so good. It terrified me. But we went after Jonathan Janz for like a good 3 minutes. You know, just like this community has fun because we're like, he's too tall, he's too good looking, he's got great biceps, he's the nicest person you're ever gonna like. It would be great if Jonathan Janz, you had him on and he turned out to be Patrick Bateman. You'd be like, this makes sense. He's a gorgeous man and he should be a horrible person. But he's like
sociopath, but he's anything but.
He's like, I heard.
Or he should be a 4'5" limping hunchback. He shouldn't have it all, you know.
Yes. You know, he's the kind of guy. I heard you had a bad day. I baked you an apple crumble. You're like, all right, Jonathan, thanks, I guess. You know,
just waiting to steal your girlfriend. You know, just waiting to swoop in and steal your girlfriend. Yeah.
And he doesn't even want to. He just happened. You know, she just looked at him. He's like, oh, okay, here we go. Yeah. But it's that I'm finding out that this community, you know, Shannon, I'm sorry, I'm speaking for the both of us, but I know you feel the same way.
I do.
Is that these people are so bright and full of life and fun and so inclusive, which I think is in this day and age is the best part about it. You know, so more horror, more horror community.
Yeah, agreed.
Indeed. I mean, there's two things that are sure to kind of wind me up. One is when people say, "Oh, horror writers must be sick." Just winds me up, you know. They must be
hear it all the time.
Go away. Yeah. And the other more specific one, it's kind of the same thing, but it's more specific. Is the Stephen King must be a pedophile because of the final sequence, because of the thing in It, right?
You want to bite through your knuckle.
I will do violence upon you because, like, have you not? Do you not understand how books work? Do you not understand how, like, why is, like, I also want to say when people say that to me, it's like, he's also killed like 15 kids in this book, but something like that doesn't bother people. Anyway, that's my hobby horse. I won't get on that. Yeah.
No, but there's two very valid, great points, and we do hear we hear it all the time about, oh, Joe, is it creepy? You know, when you have people on, are they creepy? And we're like, what the fuck? You're creepy,
right? You're bringing it to a level it doesn't need to go. Like, no, we actually it was a lovely conversation, actually.
Such incredibly lovely people, yourself included. I'm so glad we got to meet you.
Yes, same.
Well, thank you. Likewise, can I ask you a question before I go?
Yeah,
because you asked me about the book thing. Like, can you both recommend a horror movie I should watch? Having listened to me talk now, what's going? Because I don't see enough movies. What have you enjoyed this year?
I have mine, and I hope you haven't seen it. Did you see Oddity?
Not yet.
Watch Caveat, which is his first movie. God dang it, I wish I remembered the director's name. Irish director. He's incredibly good.
Yeah, I know.
Watch Caveat and then watch Oddity. They're barely linked. There's a reference to Caveat and Oddity, which is fun. Watch them both. Neil, I'm telling you, oh my goodness. Yeah. And then of course
I heard there's an all-time jump scare in that movie, right? Like an all-timer early on.
Yeah.
I like to test myself. I don't get it. They can make this wooden dummy scary, so I'm interested in what they're going to do.
It's folk horror ghost story. It's small. It's a small film.
Yeah.
It's incredibly well made.
Okay.
I think, and it's
very,
almost
very pretty film. Yeah,
it almost feels like a fairy tale. like a Grimm's fairy tale where everyone
Yeah.
fucking dies. So, like one of those. No spoilers, I mean, but you know, those fairy tales, they go dark. But Shannon, what do you have?
So I like to recommend, I think one of my favorite films I saw this year was Strange Darling, because that is a fun film. And
So I don't know what that's about. I've kept myself from knowing its secrets.
I did too. I went in completely blind. I think Sean and I just kept hearing, like, it just got a big buzz.
Yeah.
You know, and all the internet stuff, you know, like 95% and blah blah blah, and it just got really good feedback. So I went in completely blind, had no idea what it was about. And it's one of those films where it's told out of sequence.
Okay.
So, you know, like when you think you know the story, and then all of a sudden it like details start turning on you.
Yeah.
But I just found it to be fun, because I feel like that's really hard to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like a fun, the only thing I'm gonna say at all as far as the synopsis goes, it's a fun cat and mouse chase.
All right.
Okay.
And I love a good cat and mouse.
Yeah, that I really do want to see. I'm excited for this. I know nothing about it apart from the maybe a serial killer, but it may not. I don't know. So I'm looking forward to
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'm not gonna tell you.
Yeah, well, don't tell me. I will definitely check that one out.
Yeah, but I really enjoyed that one.
We're going to let you go in a minute, but two things.
Yeah.
And if I'm putting you on the spot, you don't have to answer. But how's your novel coming along? I cannot wait for this.
Well, thank you for the question. So do you know that I've got a novella coming out next year?
Yes.
So I have a novella coming out next year called Good Boy, that is my attempt to miniaturize and move Stephen King's It to a small northern English town and have the monster fought by a very brave dog. So basically it's my dog Ted is the hero basically of it. He's not called Ted, basically is. And it's about...
We know it's Ted.
The book is basically a metaphor for why people like me get stuck in small towns. And I've come up with a big supernatural, machinery for that. So that's out next year. The novel I have now gone back to is a big old gothic manor house novel with my own particular take on ghosts to do with a quarry. So again, it's all set around me. And I'm trying to Castle Rock it because it's the same town as my novella. But it's got an 80-year-old protagonist because I love, and there are not enough elderly protagonists. And it's just set in the 50s and today, again, about grim, small northern towns and the most evil witch ghost you ever met in your life, thankfully.
God damn, you're making me dizzy. Oh, I can't wait to read this. I cannot.
Well, I've got to write the damn thing first, right? I'm more confident now because the novella was the first thing I ever finished. So this, I now kind of know how to keep going, but the trouble is it wants to be a 600-page book and that will not sell for a debut, so I need to make it fit the publishing template and stuff. And it's a long way to go, but I'm working on it.
Yeah.
You're a young man and you got nothing but time.
Yeah. I know you're not doing anything else, right?
Well, I had two things. The second thing is me putting you completely on the spot. Okay. We know that ghosts are your wheelhouse. We know you love ghost stories. I don't want to do Poltergeist, and I know you're incredibly busy, but sometime in 2025, would you come back on and could we do The Woman in Black?
When we got off this call, I was going to say to you, guys, I really don't want to presume, but can I come back and do a gothic ghost story with you? Because I know more of what I'm talking about. I can actually offer some value to that conversation rather than just me going vague things about demons and time slips. Yes, happily I'll come back and do that.
I don't want to pick the movie for you. If you want to do something other than The Woman in Black, this is your choice. So whatever you want to do, but you goddamn right you're coming back.
let me think about it because I'm not really sure there is a bit. That film is unfairly underloved. I think it's a incredibly effective movie. Let me think, and we'll do something, like that.
Right.
Maybe just that,
Right,
but
great.
let me think about it. Yeah, cool.
All right, sure.
Definitely.
We've kept you long enough. This has been fantastic. I'm going to float now for the rest of the night. Neil, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Shannon, take us out of here.
All right, sinners, and that's a cut.
Woohoo! Take care, everybody.
See you later, guys.
Hey there! You just finished the latest episode of Blood, Guts, and Paper Cuts. That's fantastic. Thank you so much. We honestly do this for you, and we appreciate your time. I hope we entertained you. If we did, can we ask a huge favor? Would you be kind enough to go to iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, rate and review us? It's how we get our tiny little horror name out there and get our silly face in front of everyone and our silly little voices in everyone's ears. But we do it from a place of love, and we would really appreciate your support in doing this. You can follow us also on YouTube at Blood, Guts, and Paper Cuts Podcast, and on Instagram and Threads and Blue Sky. And you can find us there at SeanOC32. That's at SeanOC32. We really appreciate your time. Like I said, I hope you were entertained. Can't wait to see you back here in a day or two. Take care.